He spoke words that no one had dared to say before. He healed wounds that no one could touch, and yet those closest to him, his own family, thought he had lost his mind. The story in Mark 3:20-21 is one of the most human and yet most painful moments in the earthly life of Jesus. It reads, "Then Jesus entered a house, and again a crowd gathered, so that he and his disciples were not even able to eat. When his family heard about this, they went to take charge of him, for they said he is out of his mind." It's shocking. The Son of God, performing miracles, teaching truth, bringing life and light, and his own relatives believed he had gone mad. But this small passage opens a deep window into the tension between divine calling and human misunderstanding, between heavenly purpose and earthly perception. Imagine the scene. Jesus returns to a house in Galilee, perhaps in Capernaum. His fame has spread so widely that people are pressing into the doorways. There's barely room to breathe. Sick people, desperate people, curious people, all pushing toward him. He doesn't even have time to sit down to eat. His ministry is overflowing with urgency and compassion, but from the outside it looks chaotic, unsustainable, maybe even reckless. His family hears about it, and their response isn't pride or joy. It's fear, concern, embarrassment. They think he's lost control. He's out of his mind, they say. Why would they think that? Because from a human point of view, Jesus' life no longer looked normal. He wasn't living like everyone else. He wasn't resting. He wasn't settling down. He wasn't building a business or planning a family. He was attracting crowds, enemies, controversy. And to his relatives, who had grown up with him, eaten with him, known him since childhood, this sudden life of non-stop preaching and miraculous acts must have seemed extreme, maybe even delusional. They loved him, but they didn't understand him. This moment captures one of the hardest realities of faith. Sometimes, when you truly follow the calling God has placed on your life, even the people who love you most may not understand. They may think you've gone too far, that your passion is foolish, that your devotion is unhealthy. When you start to live with eternal priorities, it can look irrational to those who see only the temporary. Jesus experienced that firsthand. The misunderstanding of his family was not a sign that he had done something wrong. It was proof that he was walking in obedience to a mission far higher than what anyone around him could yet perceive. And there's something profoundly comforting in that for us today, because many of us have known that same pain. Maybe you've made a decision to serve, to give, to change your life, to follow God's calling even when it made no worldly sense. And suddenly, people began to question you. Why are you wasting your time? Why would you forgive that person? Why do you care so much about church? Why don't you think about your own success? Those voices can come from friends, co-workers, or even family. And sometimes, those voices hurt the most when they come from people we love. Jesus knew that pain. He felt that loneliness. He understood what it meant to be doubted, not just by strangers, but by those closest to him. That's why this passage in Mark isn't just about misunderstanding. It's about endurance, faithfulness, and love in the face of rejection. Notice something. Jesus doesn't argue with his family here. He doesn't shout back or defend himself. He doesn't stop what he's doing to prove a point. He simply continues his work. He keeps teaching, keeps healing, keeps loving, because his focus was not on human approval, but on divine obedience. That's an essential lesson for anyone walking in faith today. There will be seasons when following God's voice means losing the approval of others. You may be called crazy for believing in miracles in an age of doubt. You may be labeled naive for loving your enemies in a world of revenge. You may be misunderstood for giving generously when the world says, hoard for yourself. But what others call madness, heaven calls obedience. Let's look deeper into the heart of his family's reaction. In Jewish culture, family honor was deeply important. A son's actions reflected directly on the reputation of the household. When Jesus began attracting huge crowds and religious opposition, it wasn't just about his teachings. It was about how this affected the family's standing in society. They might have feared that his growing conflict with religious authorities would bring shame or even danger upon them. From their perspective, trying to take charge of him was protective. But from God's perspective, it was an attempt, however well-intentioned, to pull him away from his mission. And this is where the contrast between divine purpose and human perspective becomes most clear. We often think we're protecting someone when we're actually limiting what God is trying to do through them. The family thought they were saving Jesus from exhaustion or scandal, but in truth, they were standing in the way of redemption itself. That truth should humble us. Sometimes we can become the very obstacle to someone else's calling, not out of malice, but out of fear or misunderstanding. Maybe you've been on the other side of that equation too. You've been the one trying to stop someone because you didn't yet see what God was doing in their life. These moments remind us to be careful not to judge God's work through human eyes. There's also a quiet but powerful insight here about how God transforms relationships. Later in the Gospels, we see that Jesus' brothers who once doubted him eventually believed. James, his half-brother, became the leader of the Jerusalem church and wrote the Epistle of James. That means that misunderstanding doesn't have to be the end of the story. God can take the people who once thought you were out of your mind and turn them into partners in your mission. That transformation often takes time, patience, and the consistent witness of your faith. Jesus didn't convince his family with arguments. He revealed truth through steadfast obedience. In time, his resurrection made everything clear. What once seemed like insanity became the proof of divinity. This should encourage anyone who is walking a lonely path of obedience today. Maybe your family doesn't understand why you've changed. Maybe your faith has made you seem different, more compassionate, more humble, more focused on things unseen. Don't be discouraged. God sees, God knows, and one day those who doubted may see too. Let's return to the crowd in that house. The people pressed so close that no one could move. Jesus couldn't even eat. Yet amid that chaos, he remained centered on his mission, to teach, to heal, to bring life. His lack of rest was not a sign of imbalance, but of purpose. He was driven not by ego, but by compassion. That's an important distinction. When you pour yourself out for God, it's not recklessness if it's done in love and obedience. It becomes sacrifice. It becomes service. But there's another subtle truth here. Even Jesus needed boundaries and rest. The Gospels often note that he withdrew to solitary places to pray. So while this passage shows his relentless ministry, it also reminds us that balance is essential. His busyness wasn't chaos, it was intentional. He gave himself completely in moments of service, but found renewal in communion with the Father. For us, that balance matters too. Serving God passionately doesn't mean burning out. It means staying rooted in his presence so we can continue giving without losing our peace. In many ways, Mark 3:20-21 reveals the cost of living with holy purpose. When you live differently because of God's call, people will notice. Some will admire, some will follow, and some will question. It's the inevitable price of walking in light among those who still see through shadows. But that misunderstanding, painful as it is, can be a mark of genuine discipleship. Think about other examples throughout Scripture. Noah was mocked for building an ark. Abraham was called out of his homeland without a map. David danced before the Lord and was despised by his own wife. The prophets were dismissed as madmen. Even Paul was accused of being insane when he spoke before Festus. The pattern is clear. Those who walk with divine vision will often look irrational to those bound by worldly reason. So when people misunderstand your faith, don't rush to prove yourself. Let your life speak through consistency, humility, and love. The fruit of your obedience will become your defense. And remember this, Jesus didn't need everyone to understand him. He only needed to stay faithful to the Father's will. The same is true for you. Your peace doesn't depend on being understood. It depends on being obedient. This passage also offers a tender glimpse of Jesus' humanity. To be misunderstood by strangers is one thing, but to be doubted by family cuts deeper. It's a reminder that the Savior we worship is not distant from our pain. He lived it. When you feel unseen, unheard, or misjudged by those closest to you, remember that Jesus felt it first, and he chose love anyway. Later, when his mother and brothers stood outside wanting to speak with him, Jesus looked around at those who sat at his feet and said, "Who are my mother and my brothers? Whoever does God's will is my brother and sister and mother." This wasn't rejection. It was redefinition. He was expanding the idea of family beyond blood, creating a new spiritual family united not by genetics but by faith. Through Christ, we all become part of that family. That means if you've ever felt alone in your walk with God, misunderstood by friends, isolated in your convictions, you are not truly alone. You belong to a greater family, one that stretches across time and eternity, bound together by love and obedience to the same Lord. Maybe today you find yourself in a season of misunderstanding. You've been obeying God, but the results don't make sense to others. People talk, they question, they whisper. You wonder if you should stop, slow down, fit in. Let this story remind you, Jesus walked that same road. Stay faithful. Keep your eyes on the Father. Faithfulness often looks foolish until the fruit appears. Seeds seem buried until they sprout. Crosses look like defeat until resurrection. What others see as madness, heaven sees as the beginning of a miracle. So when you're tempted to doubt yourself because others don't understand, remember Jesus. Remember that even he, perfect, pure, and full of love, was called out of his mind. If he could endure that with grace, so can you. Continue to walk your path with humility and courage. Let your faith speak through your kindness, your patience, your endurance. Let your obedience shine brighter than any misunderstanding, because the same Spirit that sustained Jesus now lives in you. And maybe one day those who thought you were crazy for believing will come to see the truth you've known all along. That God's wisdom often appears foolish to the world, but it is the only wisdom that leads to life. If you are struggling today because you feel unseen or unheard, take heart. The one who was misunderstood most deeply now understands you completely. Bring your pain to him. Trust that he can turn every rejection into redemption, every misunderstanding into testimony, every wound into a doorway of grace. Let this story remind you that being misunderstood is not the end of your story. It might be the beginning of your ministry. Thank you for watching this message. If it touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and follow Holy Path Insights for more reflections on the life and teachings of Jesus. May you walk in faith even when the world doesn't understand, for the path of obedience always leads to glory.